Hey everyone, this is 8-Bit Flashback, and as some of you may have heard already, there's a new mod out where you can add games to a USB flash drive and play them on your Super Nintendo Classic Edition. So now it's possible to add thousands and thousands of games. So right now on my Super Nintendo I have the complete Nintendo collection, I have the complete Super Nintendo collection, I got a lot of Mario hacked games for Super Mario Bros. 3 and Super Mario World, I got some Sega CD games, Nintendo 64, and some Sega Saturn. So right now I have close to 2,000 games installed. So this is an extremely cool mod, and there's a lot of different people out there involved that help make this project work. So just to name off a few people, we have to thank Cluster because he's the one that exploited the Nintendo Classic Edition and the Super Nintendo Classic Edition, so without that exploit in the first place, none of this would have been possible. And for this USB host mod, some of the main people involved are Mad Monkey, Dan the Man 827, and Melthris. There's also a couple of YouTubers out there that have been hard at work trying to show everyone how this works. So probably one of the hardest workers on this project at the moment is Kylan K. He's been pumping out a lot of videos that have to do with this USB host mod. So in this video I'm going to be showing you a guide how I got mine to work, but if you want to know more on the subject, check out Kylan K. He's got plenty of videos that have to do with this subject. A couple other YouTubers out there I'd like to mention is Gavin Horrocks and Patton Plays. They both got multiple videos out about this USB host mod, so if you need more information, they might be a good place to go too. So with all that being said, as cool as this mod is, it does definitely have some issues. It is not very user-friendly. So before I discuss some of the problems, here's a test with a Sega Saturn game, and it did not go very well. The game's skipping and glitching. It does not seem to be playable. I'll play with the settings some more, but I don't think there's any hope for the Sega Saturn on the Super Nintendo Classic Edition. And I don't want to confuse anyone here, this has nothing to do with the USB host mod. This is just because the emulator isn't that great, and the Super Nintendo Classic Edition probably can't even handle a Sega Saturn game in the first place. And I don't think a good Sega Saturn emulator even exists. I've tried a bunch and I've never really had any success. Okay, back to the USB host mod. So the only hardware required for this mod is a USB hub that's OTG compatible and a USB flash drive. But that's where I've been running into issues. So I've tested a lot of different devices out, and I haven't had much luck. So to start off with, I tested some memory card readers that plug into a USB port, and I had no luck there at all. I tried multiple different formats, FAT32, exFAT, NTFS, nothing would work. I even tried a micro SD card reader, no luck there. Then I just tried some flash drives out. This is a 32GB SanDisk. I tried in multiple formats, no luck. Then I tried out an HP flash drive, 8GB, multiple formats, nothing. And for the USB hub, I've tested multiple things for that also. This is just a USB cable that splits into two. I thought maybe I'd get lucky and this might work, but that was a no-go. I guess you don't know unless you try. And this is an actual USB hub. It turns one port into four, and I had no luck with this. And this is actually an OTG compatible USB hub, and it looks a lot like the ones that I've seen a couple other people using to get this mod to work. But mine does not work. Even though it looks just like it has the same plugins, plugs in the same OTG switch on the side, it doesn't work. And the big problem with these is they're unbranded, so multiple companies are making these, so this becomes a game of chance whether this works or not, and it's not a very fun game to play. So when you have issues like this, it's very hard to determine whether the issue is in the software or the hardware. But I finally found something that works. This is a USB hub, man, and it is ridiculous looking, but it works. And for a flash drive, the only one I could get to work is this Samsung one. And oddly, I got this flash drive at Walmart a couple years back. There was a Samsung rep there, and he was handing out free products, and he gave me one of these. And I've never used it. This is the first time I've used it. And this flash drive is actually pretty cool. One end of it comes off, and it has a micro USB. So you can plug this into a compatible Samsung device or Android device to transfer memory back and forth. And because it has a micro USB on one side, I thought I might get lucky and be able to plug this right in the back of my Super Nintendo. But first, let me show you the USB hub man here a little bit closer. At the end of the cord here, I had to put a micro USB adapter because it was just standard USB on the end of it. And if you thought the USB hub man couldn't get any worse, he actually has two eyes and a happy face. And has a red light where the heart is supposed to be. Isn't that cute? And there's a look at the micro USB adapter that has to go on the end of the cord. And here's what I was hoping I could do with that flash drive of mine. I was hoping I could just plug it right in the back of my Super Nintendo like this, and then plug a USB extension cable to the end of this to an AC adapter. But unfortunately it does not work. Maybe in the future there'll be an update where something like this could work. That way you don't have a hub sticking out the back of your Super Nintendo or this terrible looking hub man like I have. Alright, let's go ahead and power this up and I'll show you what's going on with mine. First, I'll power it up without my flash drive inside of it, and it's going to boot right to the main menu like normal. But you probably just noticed there's a new splash screen that says Hakchi, and that's part of the software of this new USB host mod. Alright, now I'm going to power it off, let it shut down all the way, then plug in my flash drive, and I can plug my flash drive into any of the ports, doesn't matter which one. And this plugs into the AC adapter that came with the Nintendo, so nothing special on the other end. Alright, now it's time to power it back up. And there we go, it just booted up all the games that are located on the flash drive. So I'm pretty sure they don't sell these USB hub men at the store anymore. I actually found this at a thrift shop, it was only $2, and I believe it had a date on it of 2012. So I'm pretty sure you're not going to find these in your local stores. I did find some of these on eBay though, so if you search hard enough, you can get one of these terrible looking USB hubs. But in order to use this, you also need that USB micro adapter. So I've put together a guide to help you get this up and going, but I should stress, this is for advanced users only, and you should expect problems. If you're able to get this to work the first try, then you should consider yourself lucky. There's still some bugs in the software, and there's some hardware compatibility problems, so there's a lot of different issues that can happen. Now don't get me wrong, this is still a very cool mod. I just don't want to send you down a path where you think this is all easy, and it's not. So if you're not an advanced user, I'd recommend you wait, maybe give this a couple months, let all the bugs get worked out, and maybe this process will be a lot easier. But for those who can't wait, like myself, go for it. So I believe Kylan K is responsible for this core BIOS HMOD set, and this has everything we need to get this USB host mod up and running. So I'll make sure to provide a link for you down in the description, and then it'll be a link to the newest update available. So there's been quite a few updates, and as a matter of fact, while I was making the video I checked, and another update came out. So this link will take you to the newest update available. So on this page, you want to scroll all the way down to the bottom and click on the link. Then we're going to save it. Once it's done downloading, it's going to be about 138 megabytes. We're going to go ahead and open the folder. Now I'm going to minimize my internet screen. And I'm going to drag this to my desktop. And you can drag it wherever you want, but I like to drag it to my desktop so I know right where everything is. Now inside there's going to be a folder. I'm going to extract it to my desktop. So now I'm going to get rid of this. I don't need this anymore. And this is the folder that has everything I need inside of it. So now I'm going to click on Dependencies and Extras, then Advanced Users. And now I'm going to select this modified version of Hakchi. This is Hakchi 2.21e that's been modified by Dan the Man. And inside here is all the contents we need. But first we need a folder to put this contents in. So I'm going to make a folder called Hakchi E Debug Dan Version. That way I know exactly what this is. Now I'm going to take all the contents from here and extract it to this new folder I made. After extracting the contents, I can go ahead and close this window out. Now I'm going to select Hakchi GUI 132 Official. Open that up. Now I need a folder to extract this contents to. So I'm going to make another new folder and call that Hakchi GUI Official. Now I'm going to extract the entire contents of this over to this new folder. After I'm done extracting the files, I can go ahead and close that window out. Now it's time to find your stock kernel for your Super Nintendo. So when you very first hacked your Super Nintendo using Hakchi, it should have asked you to dump the kernel. And what happens when you dump that kernel, it creates a dump folder inside the Hakchi folder. So inside that dump folder is your stock Super Nintendo kernel. And if you watch my previous videos, I instructed a lot of users to take that stock kernel and copy that somewhere safe on your computer so you don't lose it. You can email it to yourself or whatever, but you want that in a safe location so you don't lose it. So for myself, I have my stock kernel located in a folder called Stock NES Kernel Don't Touch. But I guess it's time to touch it. I'm going to go ahead and drag this to my desktop. And inside this folder is my stock kernel. So I'm going to copy it. I don't want to drag this from anywhere. I want to leave it right where it is. So I just copied it. Now I'm going to open up my Hakchi GUI official folder, go inside the dump folder, and paste it inside there. So now my stock kernel is located inside of a dump folder inside the Hakchi GUI folder. Now I'm going to open up the Hakchi E Debug Dan version, and I'm going to create a folder called dump. Now I'm going to open that dump folder up, and I'm going to paste my stock kernel inside here also. So I've pasted my stock NES kernel in 2 different locations. Now it's time to open up the Hakchi application. And a tip for you before you get started, you might have to disable your antivirus protection, as I'm having a lot of issues with my antivirus program automatically deleting files and making this process way harder than it needed to be. So what I did is I disabled my antivirus protection for about 1 hour, and that should give me plenty of time to get done. Alright, so when you very first open up the Hakchi application, it's going to ask you to select which Super Nintendo you have. I have the US Super Nintendo, so I selected that. Now I'm going to go up to Kernel and click on Install. And it'll give me a prompt saying, do you really want to remove? Yes, I do. Now we need to put our Super Nintendo into FEL mode, so we need to plug in our Super Nintendo via USB cable, hold that reset button, turn the power on, continue to hold that reset button for about 4 seconds, and then let go. After that, it should automatically start uninstalling Hakchi. Once it's done uninstalling, wait about 10 seconds, then go ahead and power your Super Nintendo off and unplug it. Now this next step, some people are saying you don't have to do it, but I'm just going to go ahead and do it just to rule out any problems because I've had so many issues in the past. So I'm going to go back up to the Kernel tab and select Flash Original Kernel, select Yes. Now I need to plug my Super Nintendo back in, hold the reset button, turn the power on, continue to hold it for 3 to 4 seconds, let go, and it should start flashing the original kernel. Once I'm done, I'll get a while notification. I'll select OK. Now I'm going to wait 10 seconds, turn my Super Nintendo off, and unplug it again. Now I'm going to open up my KMFD folder. That was that very first folder I created. So I'm going to click on that. Then Dependencies and Extras, Advanced Users. Now I'm going to select 3 different HMODs, the Clovercon, the FuntFix, and the Tiny 7Z. So after selecting these 3 HMODs, I'm going to drag these over to my Hakchi screen. And I'm not ready to install these yet, so I'm going to close out that screen. Now I'm going to go back 1 folder here and select RetroArch Extreme Filters and then the Super Nintendo Dual Core. And I need to uncheck Advanced Users because I only want these 2 things to drag over. So I'm going to drag them over to my Hakchi and then close out the screen because I'm not ready to install yet. Now I'm going to head back to my previous folder over here again and uncheck this. Now these are going to be optional HMODs, so you don't have to do this. This is just going to be for HMODs that you want to install. For me, I want the Sega Genesis, I want a Nintendo 64 emulator, and I want a Sega Saturn. So I'm going to select all 3 of these. Again, these are optional. So I've dragged those over to my Hakchi screen. Now it's time to go ahead and install all the HMODs that I want to apply. So I need to make sure I checkmark all the ones that I want installed. So your required HMODs are going to be your RetroArch, your Super Nintendo, your Clovercon, your FuntFix, and the Tiny 7Z. And the rest of the HMODs are going to be optional. It just depends on which emulators you want to run. So one of the emulators I want to run is the Sega Genesis Plus GX. And for certain games like Sega CD games, you have to change the command line. So when I highlight the emulator, on the side here, it tells me what the commands need to be. So for Sega CD here, after bin in the command line, I need to put Sega CD. Otherwise, the Sega CD games won't run. And I'll explain this a little bit more as we add the Sega CD games. And the same thing for Sega Saturn games. When you add a Sega Saturn game, you got to change the command line to your boost. Okay, now I'm going to install these HMODs, so it's time to plug in my Super Nintendo again and put it back in FEL mode. Hold that reset button, turn the power on, let go of the reset button after about 4 seconds, and they should start installing. There's also a new way to install HMODs available just using your flash drive, but I haven't had much luck trying that method. Okay, all my HMODs are installed. Now I'm going to change my folder structure for my games. Alright, so now inside the Hakchi 2.21e, I'm going to uncheck the original games unless you want to have those installed. I'm going to go to Pages and Folder Structure, go down to Maximum Games per folder. I'm going to select 45, and then go down to Custom, Show Folders Manager every time. That way, every time I add games, I can pick how I want my folder structure. Now it's time to format my flash drive, and like I said before, there's going to be some compatibility issues. Not every flash drive seems to be working. So I've plugged my flash drive in the computer. Now I'm going to select it, right click it, and then select Format. Now I'm going to select NTFS. There's some other people out there saying they can only get this to work in FAT32, but for me it was the opposite. I can only get NTFS to work. And you can name the flash drive whatever you want. I just called mine Hakchi USB. After formatting it, it's time to open it up, and inside the root of the flash drive we need to create a new folder called Hakchi. Now we're going to open that up and create a folder inside that called Games. And you can also create a folder called Saves for saving your games, but for this tutorial, I'm just going to stick with making a Games folder. Now it's time to add some games, and I have some Super Nintendo games that are stored on my computer, So I'm going to pick a couple random games. I'm going to pick Mortal Kombat 3 and Miss Pac-Man. And I'm just going to copy these and paste them to my desktop. Now this next step is a pain, but what we're going to do is rename the games. We want to make sure that there's no special characters in the game name. So I'm going to right click on one of the games, go down to rename, and get rid of any special characters. You can leave underscores, but any parentheses, exclamation points have to go. After renaming them, we're going to have to open up the file and change the name inside there also. And if your game's not in a zip format to start with, you won't have to do this step. So I'm going to right click on the game, go down to rename, and rename it to the same exact name, but leave the .smc. So after renaming it, press enter. And for some reason when I renamed it, it reorganized it on my desktop, but it should still be here. There it is right there. For some reason it reorganized it to the front, but it was there. Now I'm going to do the same thing with Mortal Kombat. I'm going to rename the inside of it here, get rid of the special characters, but leave the .smc. After renaming the games, I'm going to drag both of these games over to my Hakchi. So I don't want to confuse you right now, but I have been able to get some of the games to work with special characters in the name. But what happens is some of the games will work and some of them won't. So for now, I'd recommend just removing the special characters. And I'd also recommend that you start with just 1 or 2 games until you know this works. Because what can happen is, you can have 1,000 good games and 1 game with a couple errors, and it'll cause your Super Nintendo to have a C8 error and not load anything. So let's take a look at the 2 games I just added. So normally for your Super Nintendo games, you don't have to do anything with the command line. It automatically assigns them to the right location, so Super Nintendo games are usually not a problem. So here's a look at the command line for both games, and these are both correct. Now I'm going to open up my Hakchi E folder and go to the games SNES. Now these are the 2 games I just added. So I'm going to go ahead and click on one of them. This is Miss Pac-Man. And then click on this desktop file and open it with WordPad. So a lot of times, if you're having problems with the game loading, there's usually an issue inside your desktop file. Either you still have some special characters in the name, or it's not assigned to the right location. But for this particular game, everything is good to go. Okay, now I'm going to add a couple of Sega CD games, and as a lot of you may know, Sega CD games are fairly large, so just one Sega CD game takes up all the Super Nintendo memory and then some. So for Sega CD games, I haven't had much luck trying to add them compressed, so I usually have to uncompress the Sega CD games before adding them. And inside a Sega CD game, it usually includes a bin file and a Q file. And the bin file will be the main part of the game, and the Q file is sometimes required for sound and other things. Now I'm going to double check the names of the game to make sure there's no special characters, and these names are already correct. I don't have to do anything different. These names don't contain any special characters. So I have 2 Sega CD games, Dragon's Lair and Sonic CD. So I'm going to select the bin files for both games, and then drag them over to Hakchi. Now the games are fairly large, so it's probably going to take a while to load the games, so I've fast forwarded this part so you don't have to sit and watch everything. Alright, we got the games added. We got Sonic CD and Dragon's Lair. And when I added these 2 Sega CD games, Hakchi automatically compressed both of them. And I don't want that because sometimes you end up with errors if they're compressed and they're a Sega CD game. So I'm going to uncheck the compress button for each game. Now I need to modify the command line because it's incorrect. It's bin when it should be Sega CD. Now I need to do the same thing for Dragon's Lair. So I've uncompressed the game. Now I'm going to change the command line argument from bin to Sega CD. Now I'm going to open up my Hakchi E folder again, and we're going to check out the 2 Sega CD games we just added. So I'm going to locate my games SNES folder and locate the games I just added. So if you want to locate a certain game, take note over here on the Hakchi screen, I have Sonic CD selected and it has that same file name, the WVHEA. So that can make it easier to narrow down which game it is. So now while I have this folder open, I need to add my Sonic CD Q file to this folder. So for Sonic CD especially, I have no sound unless I have the Q file. For Dragon's Lair, I might not need the Q file, but I'm going to go ahead and add it anyway. And there might be an easier way you can load your Sega CD games to Hakchi, but this way I know does work. Now I'm going to open up my desktop file with WordPad and we'll check it out. And notice the execution line where it says Sega CD, that's what I changed in the command line argument earlier. So now it's correct. Alright, let's go ahead and close everything out. Now it's time to download some box art for the games. You can just select all your games and download the box art with Google. So they all look good. Now notice at the bottom here we're taking up 778 megabytes of memory, and that's more than twice the memory of the Super Nintendo. Now what we want to do is hold the Shift button and click Synchronize Selected Games. And that's going to bring up a menu where we can select our flash drive that we formatted earlier. So on our flash drive, we want to navigate to the games folder and select that. Now we're going to click OK. Now it's going to bring up our folder structure menu where we can organize our games. Now I'm going to create a couple new folders, one called Sega CD and one called SNES. Then after creating the two folders, I'm going to click on the icon over here with a right click and then select a new icon. Super Nintendo makes sense. And the same thing for Sega CD. I don't have my Sega CD icon loaded right now, so I'm just going to pick the Genesis. And now I'm going to drag the games to the appropriate folders. Now you don't have to do this step, you can just leave your games in that unsorted folder and click OK, but I like to keep my games organized. Alright, now I'm going to click the OK button, and that's going to transfer my games to the USB flash drive along with this new folder structure. And there's a look at the new folder structure that's on our flash drive, and it's kind of confusing, but if you just start clicking on these, you'll start to understand how this folder structure works. Okay, I'm done with Hakchi E for now, so I can just close out these windows, and now it's time to open up the Hakchi GUI folder. Then click on that Hakchi GUI application. Now before I did this step, I had to make sure that my antivirus was disabled, otherwise it was deleting files and I could not complete this. And your virus protection might be different, but I'm using Norton and it gave me a lot of issues. So there's 6 different steps involved in the Hakchi GUI. The first one we already took care of in the beginning of the video. That was putting that stock kernel in a dump folder. Our next step is going to be to dump the kernel. Then after that, we're going to unpack the kernel. Then we're going to flash the kernel. Then we're going to rebuild the kernel. Then we're going to use the memboot. Now it's time to plug in that Super Nintendo, hold the reset button, turn the power on, let go reset after 4 seconds, and get into FEL mode. Now it's time to click dump kernel image. And this GUI process takes about 5 minutes, it's not too bad. Now we're going to select unpack, so we're going to unpack the kernel image. Once that's done, we're going to flash, so flash kernel. And it's going to ask you, sure? Yes, we're sure. As soon as that's done, we're going to select rebuild. So we're going to rebuild the kernel image. And that one's pretty fast. Now we're going to do the memboot. And that will be the final step of the Hakchi GUI. After the memboot step is done, wait about 10 seconds, then turn that power off to your Super Nintendo, then unplug it. Now it's time to go over to our TV and plug it in and test it out. Now I'm going to plug my flash drive into my USB hub man, kick the power on, and if all goes well I should have 2 folders, one Sega, one Super Nintendo. And I have success. Let's go ahead and take a closer look with my recording software. And I got 2 folders, and there should be a couple games in each folder. So I'm just going to click on them and make sure they load. Alright, Mortal Kombat 3 is good to go. I'm going to exit and load Mix Pac-Man, make sure it works. And Pac-Man works fine too. So I'll exit out. Now we're going to check out our Sega CD games. And we'll try Sonic CD first. And if you haven't tried Sonic CD, it's a great game. It's probably the best retro Sonic game there is, in my opinion. And I'm referring to just retro 2D games. I know there's some newer versions of Sonic that are 2D, but those aren't retro. This is a true retro game. It looks great, sounds great, and plays great. And that opinion is based off of playing it on the original Sega CD. But for the Super Nintendo, it seems to play the same exact way. I don't see any issues with the gameplay. But as much as I like this game, I've never beat it. I need to sit down one of these days and get this game beat. And actually, the first time I played this game, I was in my mid-20s and I played it on the JVC XI. I don't know if you're familiar with what that is, but it's a version of Sega Genesis and Sega CD combined. It's a pretty awesome system. I sold it a while back, and I wish I never did that because now they're like $300. Okay, so we know this game works great, so let's go ahead and try out Dragon's Lair. And this game loads, the sound works, but I can't get the controls to work yet. I'm going to have to play the settings some more. So I've actually never played this game before. I just recently heard about it when I was watching Stranger Things 2 on Netflix. They were playing this game in the arcade and it looked really cool. But the one that they were playing on that TV show was a Laserdisc version, and this is just a CD-based version, so the quality is way different. Alright everyone, thanks for watching. Hopefully this will help you get that USB host mod up and running, and if you have any questions, just ask. And if you like that video, please click that like button. And if you want to hear more from me, please subscribe. And if you want to check out more of my videos, just click any of these links.
In the mysterious caverns below the castle, your odyssey continues against the awesome forces that oppose your efforts to reach the dragon's lair. Lead on, adventurer. Your quest awaits.